Good morning, everyone. Lots going on internationally and at home, so we'll start internationally. The Daily Beast is reporting 3 major U.S. airports have announced they will start screening all passengers arriving on flights from central China after a new mystery virus has taken the life of a second victim. That was on January 18th. And moving ahead, I saw this video on Twitter the other day, and I'm just going to show it to you. This is passenger screening. This is plane passengers were individually scanned in their seats by medics to see if they were carrying the contagious SARS-like virus that has swept across China, killing 4. Okay, here it is. So they're going through the plane, zapping kind of temperature guns at people's foreheads to see if they're displaying any signs of illness. And here's CTV News, and that was a metro.co.uk news article that I found that footage in. So link is in the description if you want to see it for yourself. And CTV News is reporting Canadian airports aren't screening travelers from China for new coronavirus. This was January 17th, and today is the 21st. So this is a few days old, but still, I thought I'd mention it. The United States has joined a growing list of countries screening air travelers from China for a new virus linked to 2 deaths and dozens of infections, but Canada is so far not taking the same step. Public Health Agency of Canada confirmed Friday that airports in Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver are rolling out new messages on arrival screens asking travelers from Wuhan, the central Chinese city where the illness is believed to have started, to contact a border service agent if they are experiencing flu-like symptoms. If a traveler steps forward and shows signs of an infectious disease, they are then screened by a specialty trained quarantine officer who can identify whether or not the passenger's condition presents a potential public health risk. In the United States, 100 staffers from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention have been dispatched to 3 airports: New York's John F. Kennedy International Airport, Los Angeles International Airport, and San Francisco International Airport. An estimated 5,000 travelers to the U.S. from Wuhan are expected to be screened in the coming weeks. Officials will use thermal scanners that can be pointed at travelers' foreheads or temples for signs of illness, and travelers will be asked to fill out questionnaires asking if they visited meat and seafood markets in Wuhan. Similar screenings are underway at airports in Japan and Thailand. Canada does not have any direct flights from Wuhan, whereas New York and San Francisco each receive 3 flights per week from the city in central China. Los Angeles also receives a large number of travelers from Wuhan via Beijing. The U.S. approach is meant to detect the virus early, says Dr. Nancy Messonnier, director of the U.S. National Center for Immunization and Respiratory Diseases. The earlier we detect this virus, the better we'll understand it, and the better we'll be able to protect people, Dr. Messonnier said. But whether or not airport screenings effectively prevent the spread of infectious diseases is up for debate. The last time the U.S. ordered airport screenings was in 2014 due to concerns about the Ebola virus, and a passenger who was infected but did not show any symptoms passed through screenings. Dr. Isaac Bogark, excuse me if I've got that wrong, a clinician investigator with the Toronto General Hospital Research Institute, described Canada's approach as balanced and measured. These screenings measured are typically not that efficient in picking up travelers because many people can be incubating the infection during the time of travel and are not actively sick, he told CTV News. I scroll down a little bit. Scientists have identified the virus's genetic sequence and shared it widely, a step that the World Health Organization described as of great importance. Symptoms of the coronavirus include fever, with a few cases involving difficulty breathing. Officials say the illness is likely spread through contact with animals, but have not been able to rule out the possibility of human-to-human contact as a factor. Complicating matters is the fact that the new coronavirus shares symptoms with the common flu. Canadian public health officials say they will monitor the situation and take more aggressive measures if necessary. So I think that that's interesting. I wanted an update, so I looked for a more up-to-date article, and here's one updated 11 hours ago, and it's from CBC. It says travelers at Pearson to be asked about coronavirus amid pneumonia outbreak in China. So travelers to Toronto's Pearson International Airport will soon be asked a question about a new coronavirus that has caused a pneumonia outbreak in China. Dr. Teresa Tam, Canada's chief public health officer, told reporters on Monday that travelers will be asked a screening question at an electronic immigration kiosk if they have traveled to areas affected by the coronavirus in the last 14 days, and they will be reminded to report flu-like symptoms to border service agents. There will also be messaging on arrival screens about the coronavirus, Tam said. The Chinese Lunar Year is coming, so out of an abundance of precaution, that's why we're putting out additional information for travelers, Tam said. Federal public health officers will also post signs about the coronavirus, known as 2019 NCOV, at Vancouver's International Airport and Montreal Trudeau International Airport. So they're still kind of just doing the same thing. It's really interesting. I don't know if there's going to be a breaking point. If Canadians start getting sick in Canada, then they might change their outlook. I mean, it was interesting for me to find out that because we don't have direct travel from the affected area, they're not doing screenings. And the argument that it's not so effective, I thought was a little bit protest too much, right? Like you're saying you're kind of overselling this whole thing, because obviously there's somebody who thinks that it's worthwhile to do it, right? Like there's video of people on planes checking for sick people. So there's, I don't know. There's got to be something to it. As soon as it started, it took half the article to talk about how it's totally not worth screening for these passengers. And I was like, yeah, I don't know. So moving on to Canadian political news. Liberals say ratifying new trade deal banning assault weapons will be priorities. Ratifying the new North American Free Trade Agreement, it's the USMCA, will be a top priority for the Trudeau government when Parliament resumes next week. Legislation to ban military-style assault rifles will also be high on the agenda for the first extended sitting of Parliament since the October 21st election reduced Justin Trudeau's Liberals to a minority. So I just want to point out, banning assault weapons, assault rifles, will not reduce any of the rifle crime, gun crime that we're seeing in Toronto, because those people aren't getting their rifles in a legal way. This is window dressing on a problem that they are not willing to address. The reason it's happening is our open borders, and the reason is it's because it's easy and profitable to bring guns across the border. A $300 gun in the United States in Buffalo is a $5,000 gun in Toronto. Incentive. You see? Making it illegal will increase the price of the ill-begotten guns, incentivizing it more. It will not help anything. It's frustrating. Just like a carbon tax doesn't reduce emissions. Like it is, we're spending capital, we're spending treasure, we're spending time and energy on things that don't work. It's so frustrating. Back to the article. The Prime Minister may flesh out the agenda more today when he wraps up a 3-day cabinet retreat aimed at setting government's priorities and figuring out how to achieve them when the Liberals no longer hold a majority of seats in the House of Commons. Every measure will require support from at least one major opposition party to pass. A defeat on matters of confidence, such as the coming budget, would topple the government. The Liberals can probably rely on support from the Conservatives to win ratification of the new NAFTA, USMCA, despite the fact that the Tories have accused Trudeau of caving into concession demands by the US President Donald Trump. Yeah, I would say that that's a good bet. The Conservatives would not stop NAFTA because they would just get absolutely dragged through the mud in the press, and they wouldn't do anything because there's nothing they could do to replace it. Back to the article. The NDP and the Bloc are likely to oppose NAFTA, but are expected to support efforts of strengthen gun control. I don't see the argument there. I don't see why the NDP and Bloc would not support the USMCA. Like they had all sorts of stuff in there for the NDP, and there's jobs, right? So there's no political reason that I can see that either of these parties would take a stand against the deal. Like last September when it looked like maybe, or last August when it looked like maybe they wouldn't get a deal and Mexico and the US would sign without us, that would have been very bad for Canada, really bad. And everybody knows that. So pretend like standing up and saying, oh, yeah, we don't support this is BS if they do. And I don't see any reason to, because there's nothing better, because they can't renegotiate it because it was negotiated poorly by an amateur reporter turned minister, right? Professional reporter turned minister. Excuse me. She wasn't an amateur reporter. She interviewed George Soros. Back to the article. On Monday, Government House Leader Pablo Rodriguez said ratification of the new NAFTA is an absolute priority, a view echoed by Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland, who is leading who is the lead minister throughout the torturous negotiations to renew the contentious trade pact, and who remains responsible for seeing it across the finish line, and who Donald Trump begged Justin Trudeau to pull off that file. Please just send anybody but her. But no. And you can't have milk either, Mr. Trump. Anyway, back to this. The new NAFTA was ratified last week by the U.S. Senate, and it was ratified before Christmas by Mexico. Now it's Canada's turn, Freeland said. I think it's very important for certainty in the Canadian economy, very important for millions of Canadian workers, of Canadian businesses, of Canadian families. Did you guys see the big GM announcement? They made 1,000 temporary workers full-time workers right after closing the Ontario GM plant. Trump lured them down south, right? This is how this works, right? When you have a president who puts his nation first, he works for people, right? And it's not just about corporate welfare. He didn't lure them down there with corporate welfare. He made it attractive to open a business down there. He lowered taxes. The energy prices are much less. I mean, can you imagine cutting your energy bill in half, right? How many more workers could you afford? It makes more sense. It is a more efficient plant, right? Anyway, regardless of all of that, Trump won that. And Trudeau was left holding the bag and looking foolish, right? Back to this. Rodriguez called upon opposition parties to ratify the deal as quickly as possible. I think we should send a strong message that we're united in the ratification of this very important agreement, he said. During the campaign, the Liberals promised a number of measures to stiffen gun control in Canada, including banning assault rifles and empowering municipalities to ban handguns if they so chose. Public safety, and I think that's a stupid idea across the board. Public Safety Minister Bill Blair said Monday the government will be able to move on some measures faster than others. Quote, the prohibition of assault rifles, I think, is an important step that perhaps could be accomplished in the near term, he said. The arrangements on any potential buyback of assault rifles will take a little bit more time because I think it's really important that we get good value for the expenditure of taxpayers' dollars. And at the same time, I'm very mindful that we're dealing with law-abiding Canadians, and I want to make sure that they're treated fairly and respectfully. Blair said part of the discussions about the coming budget will involve how much money is available for programs for communities and kids aimed at preventing gun violence. These aren't communities and kids shooting up Toronto, Mr. Blair. How out of touch are you? Back to the article for the last line. He noted that many municipalities went through a very difficult summer last year with a spate of shootings and indicated that he's hopeful new investments will be made before next summer. I really should start a hashtag to track Toronto shootings. I tweet about it every single morning. Every morning I wake up and more people have been shot in Toronto every day. And it's unbelievable to me that nobody really cares. This is my tweet from this morning, 7:31. CTV Toronto says, Toronto homicide detectives are investigating a young male that was fatally shot in broad daylight. Broad daylight. And I said, oh, this one's brazen because it happened during the day. And I guess it wasn't targeted because we're not supposed to worry about those bullets flying around the city. Gun violence is out of control, and our politicians want to punish white supremacy for some reason. And I was using that as a bit hyperbolic, but fundamentally, they're not looking at the cause of the violence. They're not looking at the reality of the situation, and it's frustrating as all get out. And they're not going to address the violence that we're seeing in Toronto because they're not looking at the actual causes of it. Frustrating. Moving on to our last little bit of news. Iranian report stops short of blaming missile it fired for Ukrainian plane disaster. We're not sure if it's the missile's fault or not. Wait for the black box. We have to do an investigation. Iran acknowledged on Tuesday that its armed forces fired 2 Russian anti-aircraft missiles at a Ukrainian jetliner that crashed after taking off from Tehran's main airport earlier this month. The jetliner didn't crash. It was shot down. It didn't crash. It was shot down. Moving on. The new preliminary report by Iran's civil aviation organization, however, stopped short of blaming the TOR-M1 missile for the crash of the Boeing 737-800 flown by Ukrainian International Airways. 4 days after the January 8th shootdown, Iran denied that it fired missiles at the plane, initially blaming a technical malfunction and engine fire for the crash. However, after the US and Canada blamed missile fire for the crash, Iran's armed forces said anti-aircraft fire from the country's paramilitary Revolutionary Guard had downed the flight. The new report identifies the missile fired at the aircraft as coming from the TOR-M1 in 2017. Iran received the delivery of 29 TOR-M1s from Russia under a contract worth an estimated $700 $100 million. However, the report said the impact of these missiles on the accident and the analysis of this action are under investigation. Surveillance footage earlier obtained by the Associated Press showed 2 missiles were fired at the plane. The 2 minutes of black and white footage purportedly show 1 missile streaking across the sky and exploding near the plane. 10 seconds later, another missile is fired. Some 20 seconds after the first explosion, and another strikes near the plane. A ball of flames then falls from the sky out of frame. The TOR short-range air defense system, codenamed SA-15 by NATO, was designed during Soviet times to shoot down aircraft and precision-guided weapons. It is mounted on a tracked vehicle and carries a radar and a pack of 8 missiles. Each vehicle can operate independently. TOR has a range of up to 12 kilometers and can hit aerial targets at altitudes of up to 6 kilometers. TOR missiles, explode near their target, taking it down with shrapnel that devastates the engines, fuel tanks, and other vital components. Iranian officials have offered contradictory remarks on whether they'll send the plane's flight data and cockpit voice recorders abroad to be analyzed. The preliminary report by the Civil Aviation Organization said Iranian officials had asked French and American authorities to send them up-to-date equipment to pull the data in Iran. So, interesting stuff, right? Like, still, we're not getting the whole story. Still, they're trying to downplay the missiles. It's weird. The last story this morning is something pointed out to me by Amazing Polly, and it's unbelievable. Who knew that Peter Mackay's wife, Peter Mackay, running for the leadership of the Conservative Party, his wife is Iranian. And I mean, she's got quite the long resume, right? She's an Iranian-Canadian entertainer, public speaker, and human rights activist, former Miss World Canada, also president and co-founder of Stop Child Executions, as well as the founder of the Nazin Foundation. She immigrated to Canada with her family the year I was born. Wild, right? So, isn't that weird? Isn't that interesting? How would the leader of the Conservative Party respond if his wife were Iranian in this situation? Weird. Interesting. Things to think about. Thanks for watching, everybody. Check out CanadaPoly.com and theCanadaReport.co, or just CanadaReport.co. And have a wonderful, wonderful day.